Hey guys, Steven here, Fanatic Perspective, John Tran in the building, and we are going to talk about The Last Dance. The first two episodes aired on ESPN. By the way, thank you to Michael Jordan, LeBron James, and Richard Jefferson for throwing the energy out there that the public, we all got behind it for the early release of this documentary, 10-part series that they will be doing two episodes every Sunday night over the next month. So this past Sunday, we got episode 1 and 2. I want to do these reactions within a couple days. I know we're a little bit late with our first one here, but want to have a running series of just our thoughts for my own personal sake, for trans personal sake, just our memories, because some of my initial memories as a sports fan, just in general, sports regardless, is Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls legacy. So, Brother Tran, what were some of your biggest takeaways just from reliving, hearing the music, reliving the Chicago Bulls experience?
Well, for one, I felt like a huge loser because when they started playing in episode 2, when they started playing the Bulls intro music, I kind of got chills. It brought me back to that time. Number two, it just brought back just how just phenomenal of an athlete and focus wise that Michael Jordan had. Not only that, you forget Pippen, just just how long, lanky, athletic, and same with him, focused as well. I mean, I remember when Jordan retired for those 2 years that he single-handedly took the Bulls. Didn't he take them to the semifinals? He didn't really have.
Pippen, yeah, and they lost Game 7 to the Knicks.
Yeah, and I mean he was a top five player probably at that time,
Absolutely.
and
I
I
heard
mean
an interview
I
the
don't
other
think he got the
day.
credit that he deserved.
I heard an interview the other day with Dennis Rodman. I think he was on First Take, and he had mentioned that, in his opinion, Scottie Pippen, big parts of that season, was the best player in the world. And then ultimately Hakeem took over, right? And
Mhm.
he was no further, I would say, no worse than 3, because David Robinson was won an MVP in there as well. And those, like, that was kind of peak Hakeem, peak David Robinson, but peak Scotty was right there. And that Bulls team, that, and I know the documentary didn't cover that piece, but just for those who don't remember or don't know, that Bulls team, after Jordan retired to go to baseball, won 55 games. Was a very, very good team, but they were very, very motivated, and they had a good system with a good coach in place. And Phil Jackson, they had the infrastructure to keep things going and to keep things moving. Now, they weren't able to sustain it the following season, and they actually were going to miss the playoffs until Jordan came back and got them up to a 5th seed. But um, I want to touch on something that you talked about Jordan's athleticism, and I just want to take it a step further. I think a lot of people didn't really understand, and when I say a lot of people, I'm talking about people that weren't old enough either to remember or live through that, or
Mhm.
people that really haven't taken the time to truly study Michael Jordan in particular, the aura of him. When you see them go to Paris and how he's received, he was a rock star.
Yeah.
Okay. And the Beatles comparison to the Bulls is very, very accurate. We in our sports adulthood, I should say, um, because I probably started watching Jordan 95, 96 through, just because of my age. I'm 31, and so you started a little bit earlier than I did,
Yeah.
but um, just so I understood how big they were at that time as a kid. Like, and I'm glad they showed a lot of the kids too when they were showing the little girls, like, "Hey, I don't want a Christmas gift. I want to see the Bulls." Like, that's what it was like to be a kid during that time. But the aura behind Jordan, and I think people getting a true learning experience behind that, because like there's no way I would have known how big Muhammad Ali was in his prime if it wasn't for those documentaries and
Yep.
for all the things that people recorded over the history of time so that we could get a glimpse. And now I feel like I live during the Ali time because I have such a good picture of it. I'm so happy that they've done this series so that people that are in these debates, and we're going to talk about LeBron a little bit and all the about who's the GOAT and all this type of stuff. They've never really had the full picture of how this man was truly the most popular person on the face of the earth. When you talk about the brand, you talk about the shoes, you talk about the swagger, you talk about him as a rookie with the gold chain swag. It's next level stuff.
And he did this without social media. Like he did this all. He was his own marketing brand before things can spread now easily,
Absolutely.
and
Trends,
he did it
culture,
without that.
absolutely.
Yeah, and just the fact that he broke through that and he went worldwide with it. I know David Stern gets a lot of credit by making basketball a worldwide sport, but let's be honest, he utilized Jordan, and there was even one scene in the documentary where he came over, gave him a big hug, and that was his golden boy at that time.
They needed Jordan. Bird and
Hmm.
Magic saved the league,
Hmm.
but Jordan took the league to the modern day era. Jordan
Yes.
took the league to a global, you know, this is a major top three, top four sport in the world. And at the time Jordan was playing, was up there with any other sport. And he's highly regarded as not just the greatest basketball player ever, but the greatest athlete of
Hmm.
all time. He's in those conversations. You hear Michael Wilbon talk about there's Ali, Babe Ruth, Jordan. That's the conversation
Hmm.
in terms of impact, in terms of influence on the culture. All those things are very, very significant. And I appreciate this documentary for taking the time to meticulously go through and set the tone appropriately in episode 1, going back to his roots, the backstory. And I like how interwoven it is. I heard some people saying, oh, they're jumping around a whole bunch. A story is nuanced because there's 2 stories they got to tell, right? They got to tell everybody's backstory, right? How they got there. And then they got to tell the last dance, which
Hmm.
is that tumultuous 97-98 season with all the drama, all the Jerry Krause, all the Jerry Reinsdorf, and the what those guys are dealing with. But in order to properly tell that, you have to know how big a deal everybody was, right? And how completely insane it is to even think about. I want to start there with you from episode 1. So, Mr. Jerry Krause, how insane is it? And we're kind of living through this right now, and to a lesser degree with the New England Patriots and what's going on with Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski and their divorce from Bill
Hmm.
Belichick. And I have a feeling that it's some similar who's getting credit type vibes and just getting tired of each other. But how crazy is it that you're going for number 6, you're going for number 5, and you see them on the podium, and Michael Jordan after his 5th championship, the first time they beat Utah, and he's like, we can't break this thing up until we've earned the right to defend
Yeah.
our crown until somebody beats us. Like,
Yeah.
that's the first thing he's saying after winning a championship. He's not in a celebratory mode.
Yeah.
He's like lobbying. You get what I'm saying? Like,
No,
it's insane.
and I agree with the athlete in that perspective because if it's not broke, don't fix it. And you're a business, you could blow that up at any time. Yeah, you'll have a or a few down seasons, especially if you have Jordan. Well, he's not in his prime, but you'll have people that still want to play with Jordan, regardless of anything. But you still go with the team that got you there. You know, what are counted in history books? The championships, right?
It's all
And
people, yeah, it's a big, big chunk of what people remember. But I also think it speaks to the lack of player empowerment that we saw during that time.
mhm,
And that's where LeBron does get a lot of credit, and a lot of the brothers that came after Michael Jordan getting that power to say and leverage, right? We'll talk about Scottie Pippen here and whether he made the right call or not. But I think you also saw underlying tone of just the position, how weak it felt like players and Phil, right? You would think Phil would have more club, but for them to look at Phil, for Jerry Krause in particular, who was quickly cast as the villain, for him to say, hey, you can win 82 games, you go 82-0, and I'm still
mhm,
not bringing you back. And you're openly flirting with Tim Floyd. And for those who don't remember, Tim Floyd, and they talked about it in the documentary, but Tim Floyd was the Iowa State coach at the
mhm.
time, who they ultimately brought in, which is funny because they went back to Iowa State when they hired Fred Hoiberg like 5 years ago. But that's a whole other thing. But and he ended up at Iowa State. It is weird. But you bring in Tim Floyd, and he's going to Jerry Krause's stepdaughter's wedding with the
Wedding, yeah.
team. It's insane. Did you know, by the way, I found out the only way Phil found out about it was his wife at the time. One of the assistant coaches hit up his wife the night before and asked her what she was wearing to the wedding. And they were like, what are you talking about? Like, that's where all this started. So I guess my what I want to get from you is just some other takeaways in terms of, you're big on how athletes compete and their intensity, and there's a reason why you've always been a Jordan fan. So I just want you to touch on some of those things that were impactful to you.
So the things that he just like he had that 1 in a billion athlete has where he will not get beat. It doesn't matter. Someone starts talking, there's tons of stories that, hey, don't talk trash to Jordan because that will wake up a sleeping giant. Don't talk trash to Jordan. If you guys have time, YouTube the Kevin Garnett first time playing it. It's hilarious. But it's just going through this. You see this in him. You see this where Danny Ainge, he's playing golf with Danny Ainge before game 2. It talks trash to him about it, and he goes off and scores 63 points against that team, and he gets compared to God in that
by Larry Bird.
By Larry Bird. So,
by the way, have you ever seen a player get the type of praise from his peers and from legendary coaches? We talked about Bob Knight. We saw we heard from Dean Smith, Roy Williams, Larry Bird, Danny Ainge,
yeah.
Magic Johnson. And when they showed Magic Johnson, I want brothers to understand this, and people just out there in general to understand this. Magic Johnson was like 25, 26 years old when he said Michael Jordan's the best player in the NBA. Because they're not that very far apart in age. So that would have made Michael like 21, 22, right? Or however old he was at the time. Coming in the league, averaging 28 points per game.
About 23, 24.
As a rookie.
It was his second year. It wasn't his second year. Yeah.
So have you ever seen that before? In any sport, really? What sport have we ever seen that in?
I know LeBron came in at 18, 19 range.
Sure.
But and everyone was saying he's going to be one of the greatest when he came in, but he wasn't there yet. And yeah, he still had a couple years to grow into.
People said LeBron's the best prospect of all time, right? And he has the highest ceiling, and I agree. And I agree with that. But they were like, Bob Knight was outright said, this is the best basketball player I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Those are two different. You see what I'm saying?
No, I got it. And he was just the clips that they showed, how he'd take over a game. It's just it brings back so many memories because I remember the closest that I saw who would take over a game was Kobe in his prime. But what he did, I mean, legitimately, it was spectacular. 63 points in a playoff game against a legendary Boston Celtics team in
Boston.
Their
best team they ever had.
Yes.
That 86 Celtics team in Boston.
During a time where you could legitimately hand check, you could rough the player around, and it's a different in terms of how he did that. It hasn't been replicated in a playoff game since.
No, still the and I know he lost the game, and I know young people. So this is a lesson to some boys and girls out there for perspective, because I want people to humble themselves and just truly learn and listen, right? Listen and watch, but most importantly, learn. So I'm seeing a lot of people say, well, he did that in a losing effort, or he wouldn't be able to replicate that today with all the athleticism and the types of those things. And all of that, honestly, is baloney. And, yes, there was a different physical dimension with what you were allowed to do with hand checking wise. But from even athleticism standpoint, a lot of you are judging book by its cover, because there's a lot of people who are not athletic that are thriving in the NBA today. Nikola Jokic, Luka Doncic, they were no quicker than the dudes that were playing out there on the Celtics. JJ Barea stayed in the league for 15 years, modern day. So don't miss me. JJ Redick's still running around, and he can't jump over a phone book. So this nonsense about everybody's this super athlete, and that has nothing to do with how competitive you are
Mhm.
and well coached. Basketball is still a very high level upstairs game. I talked about Luka Doncic. Larry Bird is actually bigger than Luka. Larry Bird is almost 6'10", right? When you see Larry Bird, when you see him stand next to like Hakeem Olajuwon, they look like they're the same.
Eye to eye, yeah.
Yeah, the
Eye to
eye to
eye.
eye. So people need to take this into account. Even Dirk Nowitzki, who was a great player that just recently retired. You know, how athletic was he? So I think a lot of young guys, they get caught up with the athleticism piece and they scrap everything else. So we have to consider this. And then I'm also seeing shout out to some people on Twitter. I saw Darius Slay tweet, man, Jordan had bounce. I didn't like a surprise, right? And I at first I was like, brother, it's Air Jordan.
Air Jordan.
What are you
Air
talking
Jordan.
about? But then I had to check myself, Tran, and I'm like, these brothers
He's
didn't grow
young,
up
yeah.
he's young,
He's
and
what,
he didn't grow up.
27, 28?
He didn't see that, right? So his idea of athleticism probably starts with Kobe in my mind, right? Just if I'm looking at ages. And so people seeing, because I want to go to the college stuff, people seeing MJ block a shot and scrape his head on the backboard, right? And cut. So we want to talk about athleticism. When's the last time you saw somebody do that in the game in the last 25 years? On a defensive attempt that you
I
can
want to
recall off the top of your
say
head.
Blake Griffin did it. It might not have been defensive. I think he did it when it was a lob to him. But I can't think of someone doing that off of a block.
So maybe Blake Griffin that you can recall.
Well, and people aren't taking into account how tired a body is running up and down the court. At a full sprint to do that, he's 6 foot. He's 6'6", and the backboard is what, 9'7", 9'8". It's only 4 inches shorter than where the hoop is at.
I don't know the exact dimensions, but the fact that he can slam his head,
yes,
on the backboard as he's not, like you said, it's a defensive play that he's making, right? And so
sprinting back.
The sheer athleticism, and the thing you notice, because we could talk for days about this, when you see Michael Jordan, even in photographs, then he doesn't even. It looks like they dropped off somebody from today, right? Like physically, attire, because a big part of Jordan is the brand, how he dressed. You see him come in at the rookie, gold chains with the black shirt underneath with the red beater over top, and just the swagger in which he carried himself, the way he's moving on the floor, the in and out dribble, the crossovers, the step backs, the fadeaways, how he's finishing at the rim and ones. It's like, wow, it was like watching a player today. So he was also a trendsetter. I also want to make this point as well before we move on to Scottie. And you heard, I forgot who it was on the broadcast that said it during the draft, but they said, I think it was Clyde Frazier, and he said, it was during the '84 draft, and he was like, you can't win without a big. You got to get a big. Guards can't carry in this league. And Michael Jordan and Isaiah Thomas, because they are going to go into this, the Bad Boy
Jordan
Pistons,
rules.
Jordan rules. In either episode 3 or 4, Michael Jordan and Isaiah Thomas were the first ones to basically dispel that notion that little guys couldn't be
effective.
Not just effective, but be the catalyst behind a championship level
team.
Absolutely, because again, going back to Bird and Magic, they were big guys. Magic was 6'9", started at center in the finals as a rookie,
and he also had Kareem. He had Kareem as well,
right? So. And Bird had McHale and Parrish, and Bird was also 6'10". So Michael Jordan at 6'6", doing what he did. Incredible. So episode 2. Oh, go ahead.
Okay, 2 other things that we kind of overlooked for Jordan is that as a freshman, during the biggest game of the year in the national championship game, they didn't go to James Worthy. They went to Jordan for it.
By the way, James Worthy's nickname was Big Game James.
Mm-hmm.
Just to give, and he was the number one pick in that '82 draft, coming off
Yeah.
of that
Yeah.
national championship to the Lakers. But go ahead.
That's a huge point. Is that a legendary coach didn't go with a senior; he went with a true freshman for a game winner. He
He knew.
delivered. He delivered. Not only that, James Worthy also said, "Hey, by the second week of practice, he was better than me." And that takes a lot for an athlete, a number one pick. He is a Hall of Famer, right?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he is. Yeah, a
Yeah.
Hall of Famer comes forward and says, "Yeah, he's better than me as a freshman."
But again, that speaks to our earlier point of how unabashed they were in their praise of Jordan so early.
Mhm.
Like Magic said in the documentary at one point, we already knew what level he was at. We were just waiting for him to get the running buddies to catch up with, which is really a great segue. But because he did not have the running buddies when he got to Chicago, he inherited the traveling cocaine circus, which we need a separate documentary on. If we can, if they can get those guys out of their
doing
NBAs.
whatever he could to try not to throw them under the bus because he's like, they were doing things that I am not accustomed to.
I mean, Jordan was being a little disingenuous there because at first he's like, yeah, I mean, I don't recall any stories, and then he goes into an exact story about the hotel room in Peoria, Illinois, and it was a phenomenal story. So
yeah,
we need more content on the Bulls traveling cocaine circus, which would be an amazing name for a rock band, in my opinion.
Bulls traveling cocaine circus.
I do want to get into the Scottie Pippen stuff because as great and as much as we've flown over the Michael Jordan stuff, I would say between most of the content we probably knew, right? There was very little. It was just great reliving it and seeing it through other people's eyes that hadn't experienced it before, and them seeing, wow, his athleticism is unreal. It is mythical, like people told me about. And then the coaches saying, these aren't just highlights. This is what he was doing on a nightly basis. Never, Roy Williams made the great quote, never turned it off. But going to Scottie, because Magic's talking about he needs people to run with. And then, credit to Jerry Krause. He makes the trade with Seattle. They draft Scottie Pippen. By the way, they had President Clinton and President Obama on there with
which was
legendary. Well, it just speaks to the level of these guys, right? And number two, their titles. Obama was former Chicago resident, and Clinton was former Arkansas governor. Yeah,
not presidents.
And seeing Clinton recall seeing Scottie Pippen at Central Arkansas, but I didn't know a lot of Scottie backstory, Tran.
I honestly didn't either. I didn't remember. Let's say I didn't remember anything about his injury. I completely forgot that he sat out the first half of the year. Oh well.
Oh, in 97, 98. Yeah.
I did not know he came from a giant family where he had to deal with very rough terms with his father being paralyzed and one of his brothers being paralyzed. I didn't realize that he legitimately blew up in college because that's when when he came out of college, he was 5'10", and then all of a sudden
he went to his freshman year. He got up to 6'1".
6'1". Yep.
He was a manager at an NAIA school.
Luckily, they didn't. A couple guys didn't qualify academically, and then he begged the coach, and the coach said, "Okay, go ahead." And then he got a scholarship that way, and then during his sophomore year, he blew up to 6'7". I mean, that's
history.
Yeah, I mean, he just worked. He worked and grinded, and he just dominated everyone at that lower level. Drafted pretty high. I think he was
seventh overall, I believe.
Overall,
yeah, lottery pick.
People traded for him. Seemed like he was just quiet demeanor, and the rest was history. I know you and I have talked offline about this, how everyone compares Kawhi Leonard to him, and the holdout was even more crazy comparison in our eyes as San Antonio Spurs fans, of course.
Yeah.
I didn't know he was that underpaid.
No, that shocked me. Seeing he was making less money than Luke Longley.
Yep.
Like Luke Longley was at like 3.5. I saw on the chart, and Scottie was at like 2.8.
He was 122nd highest
Right.
paid.
It's like, and so let's get into this debate because a lot of people, this has actually been one of the more polarizing topics coming out of the first two episodes. So episode 2, they really paint the picture behind Scottie's financial situation at the time, also his outlook on his career at the time he accepts the contract from the Bulls via Jerry Krause and Jerry Reinsdorf. And,
Can we stop right there?
Sure.
I did not believe a word Reinsdorf said when he said, "Oh, I tried to talk him out of it." You're a businessman. If he approved that, he was probably ecstatic that he could sign him for that at a long-term deal. I don't believe that one bit.
I think what we'll see as this docu-series continues to progress is that Jerry Reinsdorf is actually truly the villain here.
Mm-hmm.
As much as Jerry Krause, is he Swackhammer from Space Jam? Yes. Is he?
We had a lot of comparisons.
Everybody's been seeing that meme, right? Did he completely fumble? Not just fumble, but did he undermine everything that was going on with jealousy and his ego? Absolutely. But the owner always has control, especially an owner that is and as involved as Reinsdorf was, and for him to try to play both sides of the fence.
Garbage. It's not true. He is a businessman.
Right, and I agree with you. I
don't believe that
and
you know
why? You know why I don't believe it? Because he refused to ever entertain him in terms of renegotiation.
Yeah.
And so there's no feeling of gratitude to the player for everything that they've done for your franchise. And so what does Scottie feel? Scottie feels like he's not wanted. He's not appreciated, right? You guys, and then Jerry Krause out there talking about, I couldn't believe this. Could you, like, this is why it's nuts, because if there was social media at the time, we would have heard on ESPN news cycles for the next couple of days was like, whoa, Jerry Krause just openly said that he was looking at offers for Scottie Pippen in the middle of the season.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? Like, normally it's still some level of discretion with the general manager and the players, like, but there was none with him. He just didn't even care.
The Bulls would. I don't think we would have seen a 2-3-peats from the Bulls. Honestly, I think that they would have already been blown out if there was the whole team would have been blown up if there was social media back then.
I just want to go back though to the owner, because, like you said, he claimed that he tried to talk him into not accepting the contract and whatever.
Yeah,
look,
whatever.
You guys played on his family ties. You played on his situation, which many of these organizations typically do. It's the very ugly side of sports. And at that time, Scottie's confidence wasn't where it ended up being, right? So he's still looking at himself as like, hey, if anything happens to me injury-wise, I need to make sure I need to make sure I have at least the X amount guaranteed. B, I didn't think I was going to be the second, third best player in the world. Let's be real. Nobody thought that. He even had his homeboy on there talking about, hey, did you ever think Scottie make it to the NBA? He was like, no.
No. The way he said it too, he's like, no.
I mean, you see Scottie's like, I mean, look how now, granted, I know it's Oak, right? Charles Oakley, for those who don't know I'm talking about, but look how he just tossed the brother around the locker room.
Slapped him in the face. All sorts of disrespect. I know he's a rookie, but geez.
But a 7-year, $18 million contract.
It's laughable.
With the context of the player he was, his value within the realm of sports, just.
Did they have a salary cap back then? I'm not 100%. Because Jordan was getting, what, $34 million or something like that?
Right, but Jordan only got that money after really coming back, because before then Jordan was heavily underpaid as well. Jordan was making like $4 or $5 million a year for a majority of his career. Those last few seasons is when he actually cashed in. So it just sucks that they took such advantage of his family.
Mhm.
of him thinking about his family. Now, let me ask you this, because there's the other side to this. Do you agree with how Scottie chose to handle the situation down the stretch? He's like, hey, I'm not going to F my summer up. I got hurt on company time. I'm a heel on company time, that type of mentality. And now it affects the rest of the team. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm a little bit torn on it because I see his perspective on it, but I still do think it's wrong. I'm I'm a big loyalty guy, and if you sign that document that says you're going to get paid to do your job and you do that, that's in my eyes is breaking a contract. And not only that, you definitely have those relationships with your team, and you saw them suffering the first 15 20 games,
Mm.
and it's directly correlated with you not being there, being that second runner. And that's it in my eyes is a little selfish. I understand completely, but he did sign that, and he probably should have. When he was signing his new contract, he probably should have been talking to his management team or someone else to negotiate a better contract for that, because he could have probably made about $5 to $7 million for that, guaranteed for that 7 years, as a double his money at least.
He lost tens of millions of dollars.
Hmm.
I do think, though, from a practical standpoint, I think he actually probably made the right call, because that was the only way for him to show true leverage. If he had the surgery like Jordan suggested right after the finals in '97, and I remember even the year before, maybe they'll get to this, maybe they won't, but when they played Seattle, when they had 172 games, Scotty was dealing with, I think it was either that series or the first Jazz series. He was dealing with very, very bad back cramps too. He had problems with his back as well, from
Yep.
what I recall. So he's having all these litany of issues. Um, you're now not willing to renegotiate. Put it back on the owner, and that's where we've come today in sports. Now, a lot of people aren't going to like that from the fans' perspective, because we now live in a world of load management. We now live in a world of people just jumping on and off of teams and signing one-year deals. But at the same token, these teams will move on from you within a second, as they were showing, right?
Yeah.
And so while I understand, I sympathize with the players that were there, Jordan and everybody else, and Rodman and Kerr and Kukoc, who were battling while Scotty was out. I mean, he's kind of justified when Jerry Krause is out there saying that he was trying to trade him anyway. Right? I shouldn't have to plead. They even showed a clip of Phil after they won against the Sonics. And they were like, are you going to be back next year? And he said, it depends on what management thinks. This is after you've won 72 games. This is after you've won now your fourth NBA championship. Then you win number 5, and you're still battling with management. So, now seeing Steve Kerr come out today talking about, well, we never truly resented Scotty. It's a very, very complex situation, because somebody's going to get hurt. Either you're going to hurt yourself
Hmm.
by never showing your true value and worth, and you're going to be the good, loyal, good old boy and come back and play. And I respect that. I'm not saying that's a negative, but I'm also saying at some point you gotta show your leverage in that situation. So I don't really hate what Scotty did at
I
all,
don't I don't hate
depending
it at
on
all.
what he was, the folks he was doing business with, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't hate it at all, but I mean, I just from a team standpoint, they needed him, and it obviously shows that it shows his value. He definitely was. I agree with you 100% that he was underpaid completely, and probably if I'm in his shoes right there, I'm probably pissed off constantly with that management. So I mean,
So moving forward next week, episodes 3, episodes 4, we will get a good look at Dennis Rodman, it looks like, as well
excited
as,
about that.
yeah, man, his transition from being an enemy to an ally, right? Going
Hmm.
from, for those who don't know, he was a member of the Detroit Pistons, of those championship teams, and was actually when Joe Dumars wasn't guarding Jordan, he was one of the primary defenders on Jordan. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see young Dennis transition to the Dennis we knew on the
Yeah.
Bulls. And then obviously the backstory of the Bad Boys Pistons. We'll get some more Phil Jackson backstory as well. Seeing his entry into coaching, because another thing you have to give Jerry Krause credit to was making Phil Jackson, when he was kind of blacklisted from the NBA at the time, an assistant coach on the Bulls, who he was kind of looking to develop. So, to say that Jerry Krause, we can't undermine his eye for talent from that standpoint. And then obviously the ongoing conversations that a lot of young people are making, Jordan versus LeBron, and just that overall aspect. And the ongoing debate is still the LeBron people who are riding hard for their guy, and the folks. All I say is this right now, and I'll let you speak on it, Tran. I think people really, really just need to watch the entire series to really get the full landscape and picture. Because if you're arguing LeBron and you never experienced Jordan, and you're not really taking the time to use your most objective lens to digest this information being given to you, then you're not really making the most informed basketball analysis on determining who the GOAT is. So that's my take on it.
Yeah. So I mean, it's such different eras too that they're both playing in. You know, I think both of them would be successful in either era. I think LeBron is probably.
Absolutely. They would
I
both
think.
be elite
Yeah.
in either era.
Yes. Yeah. I think LeBron is probably the greatest athlete ever created. Like whoever you believe in decided to create one.
Yeah. As
I
Bill
mean,
Simmons often says,
yeah.
he got the full car wash package from
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. But I just like it's very hard for me to say that Jordan plays in how many championships has LeBron played in? 9?
He's what, 3-6?
Yeah, he's 3-6. And honestly, he without 2 lucky shots from role players, he'd be 1-8. So without the Ray Allen shot against the Spurs, and without the Kyrie shot against the Warriors? Yeah, the Warriors. He'd be 1-9. So I mean, you can't tell me that Jordan would be that record. Just I don't think it would be in his makeup to allow himself to have a losing record within a championship whenever the championship's on
I
the
also
line.
want to say this. When we're talking about greatest of all time, and I think people need to do a better job, whether it's on TV or whether it's on social media, and granted, social media is often without context, which is why I'm enjoying this documentary, because everything is presented within context.
Yep.
When we're having a GOAT conversation, we are nitpicking.
Yes.
We are comparing people at the highest, rubric, grading scale, what have you. I understand that LeBron was the catalyst behind every single one of those finalist teams, right? Like he was, best player in basketball, all that. But if I'm comparing you to Michael Jeffrey Jordan, I gotta grade you. I now have to grade everything differently. And so I just it's not that I'm saying LeBron, like people have this thing right now, and I thought it was going to die when unfortunately Kobe passed away, where we were going to go into more of an appreciation of everyone, because I'm a fan of what LeBron's done. He's on my Mount Rushmore. I'm a Jordan fan. I'm a fan. I've grown to appreciate Kobe, being a diehard Spurs fan, and obviously I'm a Tim Duncan guy, and so you have to appreciate that. But I feel like my appreciation of everyone gives me a good worldly view of how to assess basketball in general. And because when you're a stan of one person, you don't really have a good contextual understanding of the nuances of the game. And that's where you start seeing people say foolish things, comparing eras and saying that Jordan was playing plumbers and firefighters, and disrespecting other legends in that era that would also be outstanding players today. Magic Johnson would excel in today's game. Larry Bird would excel in today's game. Karl Malone would excel in today's game. Hakeem Olajuwon would excel in today's game. Hakeem Olajuwon you can make the argument even right now, him and David Robinson, who in the league at their position is more athletic than they are then, right? So, but we leave all that out. We like to throw out these, so either use selective memory or, but we'll get into the conversation throughout this series. I think that's just going to be a recurring theme with social media. But boy, they started out with some heat, and they had high expectations as a documentary, and I expect this to win awards, man.
Yeah, well, they've so far exceeded my expectations. I mean, there's a lot of stuff there that I didn't remember, and I legitimately loved the Bulls. The Bulls were the only team that I'd want to beat the Bulls or the Spurs growing up, honestly. So I'm excited about these next ones.
Me too, man. Can't wait. We'll be back every week with our reactions, and we're just reacting, like I said, as fans, as people. Myself, who I watched at least the last three-peat real time and have some perspective. My father being the basketball head he is, and taping games, and I've done as much homework as I can. But this has been an incredible educational experience, and so, Tran, thank you for joining me today yet again.
Anytime, always.
And guys, we'll be back with more. We got the draft tomorrow, so some more content coming out. But excited nonetheless. So, everybody, peace.